Não sabe.
No, but...
Vem aqui, Luísa, só um pouquinho. This is Luísa Sugaya. This is Luísa Sugaya. She has received her PhD title recently, and now she is in charge of our outpatient clinic here at the Psychiatric Service for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Thank you. And Guilherme Polanzik, just to show your face, but Jim know you very well. But just for you to know, Jim, he's here.
Good to see you.
So
hello.
So I deeply appreciate the presence of all of them here to participate of this defense of Beatriz, whose title is Predictive Markers of Anxiety and Obsessive-Compulsive Symptoms Across Developmental Phases. So Jim, now the word is with you.
Well, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here, and I do wish I was there in person in São Paulo. But it has been a real privilege of mine to be able to interact directly with dear Ana Beatrix and yourself over the course of many years, and it's wonderful that she was also able to spend some time with us in New Haven as well. But you're my dear friend and honored colleague, and it's through your leadership that you have made invaluable contributions to our field. And certainly you have helped Beatrix really from the very beginning in terms of the work that she is going to be presenting later this morning. And I'd like to, of course, you've already, I think, introduced, at least in a few words, the individuals who are going to be the distinguished members of the examining committee. But I did have a chance to interact very briefly with Gisele Manfro. And of course, she's joining us online as I am, and she is an associate professor at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, and her research and clinical work has significantly advanced our understanding of anxiety disorders and related conditions, and she has already provided invaluable insights and suggestions to Beatrix. And then, of course, Guilherme. So it was great to see you, and I'm looking forward to interacting with you, albeit remotely. And he is an associate professor there at the University of São Paulo and has made a number of substantial contributions to the development of the field of child and adolescent psychiatry. And he's also played a very important role in guiding Beatrix's research. And Sugaya, who I've not met in person, but she is certainly a respected child and adolescent psychiatry who completed her PhD through the wonderful tripartite program involving the University of São Paulo, the Federal University of São Paulo, as well as the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. And her clinical and research expertise spans all sorts of developmental disorders and psychiatric conditions that are affecting the young people in our world. And as you all know, together this committee will evaluate Beatrix's dissertation and her defense, and we are deeply appreciative of their time and effort and look forward to the valuable insights that they will bring to this evaluation. And so I think at this point, not to go on too much longer, I'd like to invite Beatrix to begin her presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Leckman. Can you hear me well? Okay. Well, I'll just share my screen, just a second. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Beatriz Ravagnani, and I'd like to start by expressing my sincere gratitude to Professor James Leckman for his introduction and for his invaluable guidance throughout this journey. I'm also deeply honored to be evaluated by such a distinguished committee, Professor Gisele Manfro, Professor Guilherme Polanzik, and Dr. Luísa Sugaya. It's a pleasure to present my thesis today, Predictive Markers of Anxiety and Obsessive-Compulsive Symptoms Across Developmental Phases. Thank you all for being here today, whether in person or online. Nearly half of individuals diagnosed with mental health disorders experience onset before age 18, Given this early emergence, it's crucial to explore the mechanisms driving the development of these disorders in youth, as it can inform more effective prevention strategies and interventions. This thesis investigates the biopsychosocial risks associated with anxiety and obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Specifically, it examines how neurobiological, genetic, cognitive, and demographic factors may contribute to predicting these symptoms during youth development. These 3 studies summarize the work we have been conducting. I will go into detail on each study, but first, I will introduce the Brazilian high-risk cohort for mental conditions, as all 3 studies are based on data from this cohort. The Brazilian high-risk cohort is a community-based longitudinal study aimed at the examination of different aspects involved in child and adolescent mental health and development, using behavioral assessments, risk factors, neuropsychological evaluation, genetics, and neuroimaging. The cohort began in 2010 with a screening phase involving around 9,000 children and their families, selected from 57 schools in São Paulo and Porto Alegre. From this group, 2,511 children aged 6 to 14 were enrolled in the study. Of these, around 900 were randomly selected, while 1,500 were chosen based on a risk prioritization process designed to identify individuals with current symptoms or a family history of mental health conditions. Throughout the study, 3 waves of assessments were conducted, during which parents and children were participated in interviews and evaluations. Retention rates remained consistently at or above 75%, and this year we are completing the 4th assessment, already achieving nearly 80% of retention. And the parent interview involved a comprehensive household survey with a biological parent, that was usually the mother, covering a range of general risk factors for mental health conditions. It's also included a structured psychiatric interview using the Developmental and Wellbeing Assessment, or DAWA questionnaire. And for the youth evaluation, trained psychologists and speech therapists conducted assessments, including symptom evaluation, neuropsychological... Oops. Esse aqui. Ah. So for the evaluation, trained psychologists and speech therapists conducted assessments, including symptom evaluation, neuropsychological testing, risk factors, and school performance. This protocol was consistent across all the waves. A subset of individuals from the Brazilian high-risk cohort underwent scanning protocols using a 1.5 Tesla T1 weighted structural magnetic resonance imaging that we used in our studies. The subsample with MRI data comprised 708 children at baseline, 450 at the second assessment, and 420 at the third assessment. And additionally, blood and saliva samples were collected during these assessments for later analysis, including genotyping. The Brazilian high-risk cohort is a diverse cohort with data on a range of mental health conditions. In this thesis, our focus was on anxiety and an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Anxiety disorders are marked by excessive and persistent feelings of fear, worry, or dread that disrupt daily functioning. These disorders range from generalized anxiety disorder, where worry is broad and persistent, to more specific conditions such as social anxiety disorder, which centers on social situations. OCD, on the other hand, is characterized by the presence of obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are recurrent intrusive thoughts or images that cause significant distress, while compulsions are repetitive behaviors or mental acts that the individual feels compelled to perform, often to relieve distress or prevent perceived harm. In some of the studies I will present, we focused on symptoms of these conditions, either anxiety or obsessive-compulsive symptoms. These symptoms often cause distress and impairment, even at the subclinical levels, and studying them dimensionally in the community allows us to capture a broader range of experiences compared to the categorical assessments of full disorders. Anxiety disorders and OCD share key similarities, both involve intrusive, unwanted thoughts that cause distress, and individuals with these disorders may avoid situations, places, or activities that trigger anxiety or the obsessive thoughts. Also, autonomic symptoms are common in both disorders. They share underlying brain circuits, such as the frontal limbic circuit I'm showing you here, which includes the ventral orbital frontal cortex, the ventral medial frontal gyrus, the ventral anterior cingulate cortex, and amygdala. Those regions are involved in generating emotional responses. Additionally, both conditions involve brain regions related to intolerance of uncertainty, including, again, the orbital frontal cortex, the ventrum striatum, insula, amygdala, ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis. Psychiatric disorders have a complex genetic inheritance pattern involving multiple genes with small individual effects in a polygenic model. Genetic research has demonstrated that many of these genes contribute to the risk of multiple disorders, highlighting a considerable genetic overlap across major psychiatric conditions. Single nucleotide variants, or SNVs, involve a single nucleotide change within a DNA sequence. To identify common genetic variants associated with specific traits or disorders, genome-wide association studies, or GWAS, examine the entire genome of thousands of individuals. And here we see a Manhattan plot from a meta-analysis of GWAS focused on anxiety. Each point represents a genetic variant, with higher points indicating stronger associations with anxiety. Polygenic risk scores are a useful tool to translate genetic risk measured in GWAS studies by creating a score that captures part of an individual's susceptibility to disorders. PRS are a weighted sum of an individual's risk variants using effect size from GWAS as their weights. In the first and second studies of this thesis, we use the polygenic risk scores to assess the genetic risk for OCD, anxiety, or other related traits. Following this introduction, I would like to underscore that the main objective of this thesis was to investigate how neurobiological, genetic, cognitive, and demographic factors contribute to the development and progression of anxiety and obsessive-compulsive symptoms in youth, using data from the Brazilian high-risk cohort. I will now present the 3 studies that form the core of this thesis. The results of the first study were published in Frontiers in Psychiatry in 2021 in the article titled Obsessive-Compulsive Symptoms, Polygenic Risk Score, and Thalamic Development in Children from the Brazilian High-Risk Cohort. OCD has traditionally been linked to disruptions in the cortico-striato-thalamocortical circuits. However, recent research indicates that other circuits, like the frontal limbic circuit I mentioned earlier, also contribute to OCD, as illustrated in this diagram here. As you can see, the thalamus, shown here, plays a crucial role across these circuits. It acts as a relay station and gatekeeper and selectively filters information for further processing in other brain regions. It supports numerous cognitive processes, including motor function, emotion, learning, pain, attention, and consciousness. In this study, we selected the thalamus as a region of interest, not only due to its neurobiological significance, but also based on prior neuroimaging findings. The Enigma OCD working group found increased thalamic volumes in unmedicated children with OCD, while an early meta-analysis combining children and adults also reported increased thalamic volumes in OCD. In this study, we focused on obsessive-compulsive symptoms because studying them dimensionally enables us to investigate neuro and genetic risk across a spectrum of distress and impairment, providing a more nuanced understanding of how these symptoms manifest. And additionally, we aimed to explore whether genetic risk for OCD, quantified by the polygenic risk score, is associated with both thalamic volume and obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Our aim was to investigate the relationship between the thalamic volume, the OCD polygenic risk score, and obsessive-compulsive symptoms in this community sample of youth. This study included a subsample of 378 children from the Brazilian high-risk cohort, selected based on having completed MRI scans in the first 2 waves of data collection and having viable data for analysis. To measure obsessive-compulsive symptoms dimensionally, we calculated a score based on responses to 9 OCD-related items in the DALBA questionnaire completed by the youth at wave 2. Thalamic volume was assessed using FreeSurfer, and we evaluated longitudinal change in thalamic volume by calculating the symmetrized percent change. This metric is computed in FreeSurfer and reflects volume change over time by dividing the rate by the average volume as shown here. Rate corresponds to the difference in volume per time unit, and the average corresponds to the average volume. OCD polygenic risk scores were calculated with the PRS Precise software package using as training sample the summary statistics of the meta-analysis from the 2 OCD GWAS consortium. For the main analysis, a pre-threshold of 0.476 was selected because it was the most correlated with obsessive-compulsive symptoms in our sample. And for the statistical analysis, when obsessive-compulsive symptoms were the dependent variable, we used zero-altered negative binomial models, also known as hurdle models, given the zero-inflated and right-skew distribution of the symptoms as shown here. And for this analysis, thalamic symmetrized percent change, for the analysis with the thalamic symmetrized percent change as the dependent variable, multiple linear regression was used. And we included age, sex, any psychiatric comorbidity, site, and the 10 first principal components for genetic data as covariates to control for potential confounding. And this table presents the demographic and clinical characteristics of the sample. At baseline, the mean age was 10, and by wave 2, it was 14, and 42% of the participants were female. A significant positive relationship between right thalamic symmetrized percent change and obsessive-compulsive symptoms was found in the zero hurdle part of the model. The results indicate that right thalamus change was related to having at least one symptom reported. As you can see in the box plot, the mean symmetrized percent change for children with at least one obsessive-compulsive symptom is closer to 0, indicating a slower decrease when compared to children with no symptom reported. And there was no significant relationship in the count part of the model. This means that the thalamic rate of change was not related to the amount of symptoms. And there was no significant relationship between the left symmetrized percent change and symptoms in both the zero hurdle and the count parts of the model. And there was no significant relationship between the OCD polygenic risk score and obsessive-compulsive symptoms, and between the polygenic risk score and the thalamic symmetrized percent change. We discovered that changes in right thalamic volume over 3 years were associated with the presence of at least one obsessive-compulsive symptom at follow-up in a community sample. But change in right thalamic volume did not correlate with the number of symptoms reported. Our findings suggest that participants with at least one symptom had a slower decrease in right thalamic volume, indicating that alterations in thalamic trajectory may occur even in the absence of a full syndrome. And this slower decrease could potentially explain the increased average thalamic volume observed in previous studies, such as the Enigma OCD. And while we anticipated finding associations between obsessive-compulsive symptoms and the polygenic risk score, as well as between change in thalamic volume and the polygenic risk score, our analysis did not reveal any significant relationships. One possible explanation for this lack of association could be the small sample sizes of the OCD GWAS we used. Additionally, it's important to note that OCD GWAS primarily consists of samples with European ancestry, where our sample is ethnically diverse. And research has shown that the performance of polygenic risk scores is generally less effective in non-European populations, particularly among those of African ancestry. The results of the second study were published in JCPP Advances in 2024 in the article titled "The Trajectory of Anxiety Symptoms During the Transition from Childhood to Young Adulthood is Predicted by IQ and Sex, but not Polygenic Risk Scores." Anxiety symptoms are part of normal development, but for some children, these symptoms can become disruptive at certain stages. Data-driven methods are valuable tools for evaluating symptom trajectories over time and are widely used in longitudinal studies examining anxiety in youth. These charts illustrates examples with anxiety symptoms on the y-axis and the age or time in the x-axis. Although there is some variability across studies, findings consistently indicate that approximately 10% of participants show persistently high levels of anxiety, and furthermore, 3 out of 4 studies examining anxiety trajectories in youth concluded that a 3-class model provided the best fit for their data. In our study, we aim to identify the trajectory of anxiety symptoms that best describe our sample using a similar data-driven approach. Understanding the factors associated with anxiety symptom trajectories during development can guide interventions for children at greater risk of impairment. Anxiety disorders arise from a complex interplay of genetic, environmental, and biological influences. And previous research has identified factors such as genetic risk, female sex, maternal mental health disorders, and childhood adversity as important contributors to anxiety development. In our study, we also aim examining whether intelligence measured by IQ was associated with specific anxiety trajectories. While intelligence has been linked to anxiety, the findings are mixed, with both high and low IQ associated with anxiety symptoms. These mixed results underscore the need for further investigation to clarify the relationship between IQ and anxiety. The study had 3 main aims. The first aim was to identify trajectories of anxiety symptoms in youth, aged from 6 to 22 years, measured at 3 data points between 2010 and 2019. The second aim was to examine the impact of intelligence, sex, threat exposure, and maternal mental health disorders on the course of the anxiety trajectories. The third aim was to determine if polygenic risk score for anxiety, depression, subjective well-being could predict anxiety trajectory. To construct anxiety trajectories, we used self-reported anxiety symptoms from the Screen for Child Anxiety-Related Disorders, or SCARED questionnaire. It was administered across the first 3 waves of data collection, and this analysis included a sample of 2,033 youth who had data available from at least 2 assessment points. We began by deriving a factor score for each participant using confirmatory factor analysis. These factor scores were then used as input for growth mixture modeling to identify distinct anxiety trajectories. To determine the best fitting model, we compared models with varying number of classes, 1 to 6, using fit indices such as the Bayesian information criterion. To examine the effects of baseline cognitive, environmental, demographic, and genetic factors on trajectory class membership, we conducted multinomial logistic regression analysis. The factors included sex, IQ, threat exposure, maternal mental health history, and polygenic risk scores for anxiety, depression, and subjective well-being. These polygenic risk scores were calculated with the PRS-CS software. And to control for potential confounding, we also included socioeconomic status, age, skin color, and site as covariates, as well as the 10 first principal components for the genetic data. This table shows the demographic and clinical characteristics of our sample. At baseline, the mean age was 10, and it was 13.8 in the wave 2 and 18 in wave 3. And additionally, 45% of the participants were female. The model that best fit the data was a 3-class model. The high decreasing class, in red here, represented 7.6% of the sample, characterized by high initial anxiety levels that decreased over time. The moderate low stable class was the largest, and it's shown in green here, and it comprised 89% of the participants and showed moderate to low anxiety levels that remained stable, reflecting typical anxiety levels in the general population. Lastly, the low increasing class in blue, making up 2.9% of the sample, started with low anxiety levels that increased over time. And showing this table, we found that IQ was associated with the two anxiety trajectories that differed from the moderate-low stable trajectory. Specifically, lower IQ predicted membership in the high decreasing class, while higher IQ was linked to membership in the low increasing class. Additionally, females had significantly higher odds than males of being in the low increasing class. In contrast, contrary to our hypothesis, polygenic risk scores for internalizing symptoms, maternal mental health disorders, and threat exposure were not significantly associated with any of the anxiety trajectories. Our analysis identified three distinct symptom trajectories consistent with prior studies. The high decreasing class had elevated symptoms in childhood that diminished over time and was associated with early onset anxiety disorders such as separation anxiety and specific phobia. In contrast, the low increasing class began with lower symptoms that increased over time, aligned with disorders that typically emerge later, such as panic disorder, social phobia, and generalized anxiety disorder. Sex and intelligence quotient were the primary predictors of trajectory membership. Our findings align with epidemiological data showing that anxiety disorders are more prevalent in females, particularly after puberty. And interventions should therefore prioritize girls who are at higher risk of developing anxiety after puberty. And moreover, attention should be given to individuals in the extremes of the IQ spectrum, those with lower IQ who are more likely to experience anxiety during childhood, and those with higher IQ who may be at risk of escalating anxiety during adolescence and early adulthood. Both groups may benefit from tailored approaches. The results of the third study are in the process of being submitted to the Psychiatry Research Journal under the title Machine Learning Approach to Enhance Anxiety Diagnosis Using Structural MRI Fails When Classifying Unseen Data. Results from a large developmental cohort. Machine learning is a predictive modeling approach that uses algorithms to identify patterns in complex data. This strategy is especially useful in neuroimaging studies where the number of input variables often exceeds the number of participants. While machine learning has shown potential for predicting anxiety disorders in children and adolescents based on brain measurements, findings so far have been mixed. For instance, one longitudinal study achieved an error under the curve of 0.68 for predicting future anxiety disorders using only psychometric features. When MRI volumes were included, the prediction was not improved for pooled anxiety disorders. It only improved for generalized anxiety disorder, with this error under the curve of 0.68 as well. Another study attempting to predict 10 psychiatric disorders using MRI found significant models only for ADHD and bipolar disorder, with models for anxiety disorders performing no better than chance. Model performance is often evaluated using various metrics, and area under the curve is one of the most informative and interpretables. While there is no strict cutoff, a clinically useful model typically has an area under the curve above 0.75, and area under the curve below 0.6 indicates poor discriminatory ability, while values between 0.6 and 0.75 suggest moderate performance. Beyond these metrics, it's crucial to assess whether the model can generalize well to unseen data, as this is key for its application in real-world settings. There is a substantial gap in research on applying machine learning to predict anxiety at the individual level based on MRI data, especially in youth populations. In this third study, we aim to fill this gap by investigating the potential of utilizing structural MRI data to predict anxiety disorders using machine learning. The second aim was to identify the brain regions that were most important for prediction. In this study, we analyzed a subsample of youth from the Brazilian high-risk cohort who underwent MRI scans across 3 assessment waves. Participants were divided into 2 groups, the pooled anxiety disorders group and the healthy control group. Those who received a diagnosis of anxiety at any of the 3 assessments and underwent a variable scan during that assessment were included in the pooled anxiety disorders group. It's worth noting that if a participant received the anxiety diagnosis at multiple time points, we randomly selected one of these moments, and this group consisted of 209 youth. On the other hand, the healthy control groups comprised youth who did not receive any DABA diagnosis in any of the assessments. And in cases where healthy controls had undergone multiple MRIs, we selected only one of these moments. This group consisted of 299 youth. Since the control group had a higher proportion of males than the anxiety group, we stratified the control sample by sex to balance between the groups. This is important because measurements of brain volume differ between men and women, with men generally having a larger brain volume. This resulted in a sample of 232 youth in the control group. This diagram represents how our model works. Our algorithm is a classifier that uses structural magnetic resonance imaging data to classify individuals into anxiety or healthy control group. For this analysis, we used structural MRI data collected on a 1.5 Tesla scanner processed with FreeSurfer. We extracted 291 features, including metrics for surface area, cortical thickness, volume, and mean curvature. And to account for head size, we adjusted cortical and subcortical volumes by dividing by the total intracranial volume, and cortical area by the hemispheric area. Additionally, we applied the combat harmonization method to correct for potential biases due to differences in collection sites, as scanner variability can impact the results. 80% of the participants were randomly allocated to the test set and 20% for the validation set. We used a combination of feature selection techniques to reduce dimensionality and mitigate multicollinearity. The selected features were then entered into a grid search with a 5-fold cross-validation on the test set using a random forest classifier. The classifier was trained to predict membership in either the pooled anxiety disorders group or the healthy control group. And the final model with optimized features was then tested on unseen validation set to assess its predictive accuracy. This table shows the social demographic and cognitive characteristics of the study participants in the test and validation sets. Within the test set, the pooled anxiety disorders group had a higher proportion of individuals from Porto Alegre and self-declared white participants when compared to the healthy control group. Additionally, the pooled anxiety disorders group was slightly older, with a mean age of 13.8 years, compared to the health control group mean age of 13 years. There were no significant differences between the groups in the test and validation sets in terms of sex, socioeconomic status, and IQ. In the test set, the model achieved an area under the curve of 0.70 and a mean area under the precision recall curve of 0.68, reflecting moderate discrimination between classes. The model's accuracy was 64%, with a precision of also 64%, and a recall of 59%, meaning the model correctly identified 64% of the predicted positive cases and 59% of all actual positive cases. A permutation test confirmed that this area under the curve of 0.70 significantly exceeds chance, demonstrating the model's predictive capability. However, when applied to the validation set, the model's performance was no better than chance. The ROC curve here shows the mean area under the curve across the folds, the blue line here, with individual area under the curve of the folds in the other lines presented here. The variability across folds highlights some instability in the model's performance. These are the 9 regions driving the predictive model. However, this finding should be interpreted with caution since the model did not generalize to the validation sample. This study aimed to determine whether structural MRI data could predict anxiety disorders in youth from the Brazilian high-risk cohort using machine learning algorithms. Our finding revealed that the structural MRI alone was insufficient for reliable prediction. While the model demonstrated moderate performance ability within the test sample, it showed significant variability across the folds, and also it couldn't generalize to the validation sample. Given our prior research on machine learning for predicting psychiatric disorders in youth, these challenges were anticipated. Many studies report modest performance or results not exceeding chance, even when incorporating clinical and psychometric data. This suggests that although structural MRI features may capture some aspects of anxiety, they were not robust enough for reliable classification. And future studies might benefit from exploring functional MRI or other neuroimaging techniques for potentially greater predictive power. Additionally, larger sample sizes remain essential. Despite this cohort being the largest developmental cohort in Latin America and sizable for neuroimaging research, it may still have been insufficient for distinguishing youth with anxiety disorders from healthy controls. These 3 studies deepen our understanding of the factors influencing the development of anxiety and obsessive-compulsive symptoms in youth. Study 1 reaffirmed the thalamus role in OCD neurobiology, showing that alterations in thalamic structure are evident even in community samples with subclinical symptoms. Study 2 underscores the need for targeted interventions and prevention strategies tailored to specific vulnerabilities. Females, particularly after puberty, are at higher risk of anxiety, which policymakers should consider in planning mental health resources. Additionally, IQ was associated with distinct anxiety trajectories, higher IQ with increasing anxiety during late adolescence, and lower IQ with early onset anxiety. Tailoring intervention to these distinct groups could improve outcomes. Study 3 demonstrated that structural MRI alone is insufficient for reliable predicting anxiety disorders with machine learning. Further research should explore alternative neuroimaging modalities such as functional MRI and larger sample sizes to improve predictive accuracy. Additionally, our new findings on genetic associations highlight the need for inclusive and diverse GWAS studies to better capture genetic risk across populations. In conclusion, future research should continue investigating the complex interplay of neurobiology, genetics, and social demographic factors in youth development, as these insights are crucial for developing effective, personalized approach to mental health prevention and treatment. Thank you.
So Jim, now we follow that for the second part, and so Bia will sit there, right? And maybe I can change it over there. Then Bia, Luisa, and Guilherme will sit here. Okay. And usually, Jim, the examiner from the father's examiner will start first. So Gisele will be the first, okay, Gisele, to do the examination. Vocês querem ficar aqui depois? Tá. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Gisele and Bia, you have 40 minutes for the whole discussion between you two.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Beatriz, Professor James Leckman, and Professor Euripides for the honor of inviting me to be a member of the examination committee for this important thesis. It's truly a privilege to be part of this special occasion, especially given my own research interest in the trajectory of anxiety disorders. I would like to begin by emphasizing the significance of Beatriz's work. It takes great courage and intellectual commitment to tackle a topic as challenging and complex as anxiety disorders, particularly when considering the...
Wow. Do you speak, while I will try to fix, can you try to speak closer to the microphone? Is it possible?
Yes.
Or speak a little louder. We will try to enhance the volume. Can you try?
Should I? Yes. Is it better now? Because I'm using I am right in the... Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay.
So should I start from the beginning, or can I keep on going?
Go ahead. Can keep on going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it takes a great courage and intellectual commitment to tackle a topic as challenging and complex as anxiety disorders, particularly when considering the often inconsistent and sometimes discouraging results from neuroimaging and genetic studies in this field. While we have many problems, probably considering our psychometric properties and the great influence of environment factors. So, but anyway, anxiety disorders are highly prevalent, particularly among youth, and a substantial number of individuals still do not receive adequate treatment. So Beatriz's research, therefore, stands us as a crucial contribution to our understanding and approach to these pervasive conditions. Important questions regarding which individuals are most likely to experience a pervasive and chronic course of anxiety disorders are critical when thinking about selective intervention strategies. Understanding who is at greatest risk could help inform more targeted approach to treatment. In this context, also, the cost-effectiveness of universal versus selective strategy is a key issue that warrants further investigation. Identify who will benefit most from specific intervention is, in fact, a central question in the evolving field of precision psychiatry. In this way, Beatriz's thesis is highly relevant to this discussion, and her work aligns closely with the current state of art in the study of anxiety disorders and holds the potential to make significant contributions to our understanding. By addressing these pressing questions, her research could offer valuable insights that advance both our scientific knowledge and clinical practice in the field of mental health. So, in the beginning, I would like to say how beautiful is Beatriz's work, and also I would like to point the beauty of her presentation, and it shows the understanding and the deep understanding that Beatriz has in anxiety disorder. So I would also like to emphasize the introductions in Beatriz's thesis, particularly her review of critical topics, such as the importance of studying the trajectory of anxiety disorder, and highlight some core features of anxiety that should be carefully considered. I emphasize the central symptoms of fear, the anticipatory anxiety, the avoidance, all of which are fundamental in understanding how anxiety manifests and develops over the time. The fluctuation nature of anxiety, the waxing and waning course, adds further complexity. the risk factors for comorbid condition, depression, substance use, and these relations that can complicate the diagnosis and treatment of anxiety later on. And I would like to ask some questions regarding, on page 23 of the introduction, before I start in the studies, Beatriz presents an important concepts of anxiety across the life cycle, which I believe offers valuable insight into how anxiety might evolve over time. This perspective is particularly insightful because it emphasizes the shifts in the focus of fear at different life stages. So I truly believe that most of our studies should focus in the difference of anxiety and the focus of fear depending on the scenario of the lifespan, you know, like for example, in children, anxiety may be closely tied to fears related to separation from parents, while in adolescence, the fear often shifts towards the concern about peer approval and social acceptance. So don't you think that when you study the trajectory of anxiety disorder, it would be interesting to focus on the type of symptoms?
Yes. Should I answer now or later after all this question? What do you prefer?
I think we could
be like
work on this. Yes,
yeah.
A conversation, if it's possible. I don't know exactly what are the roles in USP, if we can just talk.
Okay. Sure. I think it would be interesting, yes. I don't know if I could hear it well, but I think you said that it would be interesting to look at subtypes of anxiety as well, maybe on the trajectories, like to look at social anxiety trajectory, or maybe a separation anxiety trajectories, like divide, maybe like take the scale and divide it into dimensions, into subtypes of anxiety. I think that would be really interesting as well.
Yes, it's exactly not only the different trajectories of each part of the anxiety, each type of anxiety disorder, but especially the symptom, because I think it's going to change over the life cycle.
Yes. Yeah, that would be interesting. Like maybe, for instance, in the beginning of life, children that have separation anxiety later can have social anxiety or other. Yeah, this would be interesting indeed, to look at specific symptom trajectories.
Okay. There is also one part of your presentation that you try to make some correlations between anxiety and OCD, and I really believe that they share more similarities than difference. However, some OCD-related disorders, and I think that's why they separate OCD from anxiety, such as trichotillomania and skin-picking disorders and hoarding, they exhibit a kind of addictive-like behavior.
Gisele, we couldn't hear you for a while. Can you repeat again the last sentence, because we couldn't hear, because they are trying to fix the audio here.
Oh, sorry.
It's kind of they are trying to
fix it. Okay. I'm trying to discuss with you the similarities and differences between anxiety disorders as a group and OCD. Yeah. And I think that they share more similarities than differences. However, some OCD-related disorders, such as trichotillomania and skin-picking disorder, they exhibit, and hoarding, they exhibit a kind of addictive-like behavior, which are not typically present in the other anxiety disorders. So I think while this construct was not explored in the current work, it falls outside the scope of its objective, but I really want to listen, to hear you, what you think about these similarities and differences.
Okay. I agree there are many similarities, like these repetitive thoughts or obsessive thoughts. They are different between anxiety and OCD. In OCD, they have more magical contact, or also more somehow they are more like unwanted or weird. They think it's like I forgot the word for it, but when it's not something that you feel that it comes from you, it's something coming from outside. So OCD has more this characteristic, but anxiety, on the other hand, usually the worries and the obsessions are more, the recurrent thoughts are more related to something that could happen, even if they are improbable of happening. Usually it's more related to real threats or like social exposure. Or so I think they have important similarities. Also, the autonomic symptoms like increased heart rate, or the feeling of anxiety during this moments when these thoughts come, and they are usually similar as well. But there are many differences, because OCD has these sometimes it's like an urge or a premonitory feeling, a bit like tic disorders. That's also something that some OCD is also really comorbid with tic disorders. So, and also the repetitive behaviors could be similar somehow, like avoiding places or avoiding doing some things. But also OCD rituals can be really stereotyped and different from anxiety, right? So I think there are many differences and similarities, and it would be interesting to study. I didn't do this in this thesis, but it would be really interesting to compare both, and also maybe with other previous like PTSD that was previously also assigned under anxiety disorders category. So they share many similarities, I think. It would be interesting to look at.
Yeah, I really agree with you, and I think they share the core symptoms of fear, of anticipatory anxiety and avoidance, but I really think that they have some disparities, and especially when you look at the GWAS data, you have some associations between OCD with autism and schizophrenia that you don't find with the other anxiety disorders. So I think there are some similarities, but also some difference that could be studied. And I think your thesis, in a way, touch in this field of the similarities and differences. And I think it was really very well written, and you try to investigate these contributions of neurobiology, genetic, cognitive, demographic factors in the development of anxiety and OCD in 3 great studies. Are you listening?
Yes. I think the microphone there is on, maybe. Can you hear people talking or not? Yeah?
No, but it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. We turn off.
Okay. And I think the 3 studies are really very nice, very well designed, and you try to answer specific questions. So you have a priori hypothesis, which is very interesting. So I'm going to pick up some questions related to each study that I think it was nice if we could deeply discuss it a little bit more. So concerning the study 1, I am interested and I would like to know what are the psychometric properties of the DALBA, assessing all obsessive-compulsive symptoms, and in using the sum of the questions that evaluate the symptoms, is it a valid and reliable approach?
Yeah, we couldn't assess this validity of the DALBA questionnaire because we didn't have many cases of OCD. We had only 5 cases of OCD, so we couldn't really assess if it was measuring really obsessive compulsive symptoms. We really wanted to study it as a continuous measure to capture this broader range of experiences. But we had this limitation of using a questionnaire that was not designed to be computed as a score, right? And so but at the same time, we thought it could be also used like that, like CBCL is often used summing items. And we chose to use DALBA because it was the only questionnaire applied in the children themselves or the youth. It was the only one that has self-report data. And the other, like the CBCL, was answered by the parents, and there was also the DALBA answered by the parents as well. And previous research suggests that the individuals in the general population often rate their symptoms higher than external informants, especially for OCD, because OCD is often characterized by this secrecy, and also it has a really delayed diagnosis. So often people don't seek for help, and they don't share this. Sometimes they don't share the suffering with other people. So it's possible that the parents didn't know that the children had these symptoms. So we really wanted to have a self-reported data. That's why we chose to use DALBA, even if it's not like usually computed as a score. And we didn't want also to combine data from the parents with the children, because this could give some biases. But we also, during our study, we used this score that was computed by our group, like a different study from Barros in 2021, Pedro Macu, that's my colleague. And we used that score as well, this OC factor score from his study. And he combined these informations, and he had 2 different scores, one for baseline and one for follow-up. And on the baseline, only parents give, they used only information from parents. On the follow-up, they used this information from parents and children. But we think there was this limitation of combining informants and also comparing 2 really different measurements, like only parent report with children and parent combined. So I think it's a challenge for longitudinal analysis during development, because we have these different informants, different instruments being used, and it's hard to combine them. And it can give us a lot of bias, because children and parents report usually have low to moderate correlation. So it can be complicated. But we tried to do this mixed effects model in this study, in the first study, with these OC factor scores, and we couldn't find any relationship with the thalamic volume when we use this combined this OC factor score, this combined score.
Yeah. I really agree with you, and I think it was a great strategy, but I think we should discuss this in deeper. And I was also thinking that you couldn't find anything related to the number of symptoms and the severity, but considering that OCD is a very heterogeneous disorder, we are not talking about the disorder, but the kind of symptoms, could you look at the type of symptoms, if they are any different?
No, we didn't look at the type of symptoms. We only looked at this sum. We didn't look at possible symptom, like categoric or type of OCD, right? Like
Yes.
contamination.
Yes.
Or yeah, we didn't do that. It would be interesting.
Yes, I thought that we could find. I don't know if we are going to find because of our sample size, but I think it would be interesting if we could advance in this different heterogeneous of OCD disorder. You know, it's so it could be, instead of the severity by the number of symptoms, the type of symptoms, especially because I'm very concerned about the environment. And I think we have a decrease in obsessive compulsive symptoms when you get into adolescent, because we have this huge sharp curve. And I think this concerns that if we remember the psychoanalytic concepts, we have higher impulse during childhood, and after in adolescence. And when we have the school years, these young youth, they usually have to decrease the impulse and need to accept many rules for the children to begin to integrate into society. So I think this could be something interesting related to this U-sharp curve. And I think we are going to have different type of symptoms.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense for you.
Yeah. It would be interesting to look at that, I think.
Okay. And I completely agree that there are some limitations to use PRS. So going to the second study, Bia, I'm very interested on the selecting factors for analysis. How did you decide which factors, the intelligence, sex, exposure to threat, the mental health, how did you decide for these factors to include in your study?
Yeah, we looked at the literature, and there were some factors that were already related to anxiety symptom trajectories, or anxiety in general, predicting anxiety disorders. Sex after, like, women after puberty is a really well established factor associated with developing anxiety, and maternal mental health disorder as well, usually depression or anxiety, but we decided to include any disorder here. But the literature shows this relationship, especially with depression and anxiety, and childhood adversity as well. All of them were related to anxiety, and we were curious about evaluating cognitive factors as well. That's why we included IQ, because this is not so well established. I found some studies, only 2 in the general population, that were more reliable and also in a community sample, that mostly found a relationship between anxiety and lower IQ. But there was one that showed a relationship between depression and higher IQ. And depression is really related to anxiety. So we thought it could be interesting to look at this in our sample as well. And about choosing threat instead of, because I used this variable threat exposure that we had it was computed by our group in another study. And we had this threat dimension and deprivation dimension, and we picked the threat dimension to use in our study because we thought it could be more related to anxiety. That's why also. And the polygenic risk scores, because we wanted to evaluate the genetic risk for anxiety, and we included many phenotypes that could be related to anxiety because we wanted to assess if this genetic risk was shared, like between anxiety, depression, and subjective well-being. Also, we thought because it could also be related to the trajectories, even though they are different concepts, and these GWAS were made based on categorical diagnosis. For anxiety. For depression was not that categorical. It was a depression in general, but not the disorder. But subjective well-being was a more like dimensional measure as well. So we tried to, I don't know, see if there was any relationship between this genetic risk and our trajectories, but we couldn't find any significant result for the genetics. Yeah, only for IQ and sex. Yeah.
Okay, so I have two questions concerning the factors. One is that you choose maternal mental health in general. Why didn't you pick only the internalized symptoms like depression and anxiety? And why do you prefer to choose maternal mental health?
Yeah, we thought that any disorder could impact anxiety trajectories, and we wanted to access that. But maybe if we had included specific internalizing disorders, we could have found a relationship there that we didn't. That's a really possible explanation for why we didn't. But we thought maybe all the disorders, like substance use disorder or any disorder, could be related to. Yeah, that was our hypothesis, but we couldn't, find. But I think we need further research on that.
Okay. My other question is, why did you classify moderate symptoms on the scale as normal? Because there is this, most of your youth, they stay in these low moderate symptoms when you classify the 3 trajectories. And I was thinking, if someone has moderate symptoms, all the evaluations, do you think they are exactly as a kid without symptoms or with low symptoms?
Yeah, I think it's a limitation of the method because it's a data-driven method. So I didn't pick myself the trajectories. We modeled it, and we found that these trajectories were the best fitting with the best indices for our sample. But I agree that maybe we could separate in even more trajectories and find someone that's intermediate somehow, and they could have a different impact as well. I think it's a good thing about data-driven methods, but also a limitation maybe that we could look at the data in a different way as well.
Yeah, so I really have to read and learn about growth mixture modeling. I didn't know about this way of analyzing the data. And when I read, they say that the big limitation is that they assume normality. And usually real data often contains non-normal distribution. Do you know anything about this?
They scared different from the OCD. Because the OCD I showed in the presentation, it's really right-skilled, right? The obsessive-compulsive symptoms computed by the Dalbo questionnaire is really right-skilled and zero-inflated. But they scared has it's not perfectly normal, but it's more normal. It's more normally distributed than the OCD scales, let's say, because anxiety symptoms occur in the general population at some levels. That's why I suppose that this moderate low symptoms trajectory was reflecting the general population symptoms, because everyone has a little bit of anxiety symptom. That's why if you apply the scared questionnaire in the general population, you have a more normal distribution. That's why we thought it was okay to use this method as well.
Okay. I also think, remember that once we have discussed about this idea of having trajectories depending on the chronic course, the walks and wane course, and the no anxiety course. Have you ever thought about discussing the trajectories concerning these three different ways?
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing the way you choose. It's just for me to understand that, and because I always thought about this, the trajectory concerning people that have a chronic and pervasive course, the ones that have no anxiety or low anxiety, the whole development, and the walks and wane courses during the development.
Yeah. We only had 3 data points. So I think if we include like the fourth assessment that we are collecting now, and maybe later assessment, we could see more of this, because it would be, in this method, it could be possible that there was this decreasing and increasing again of symptoms, but we didn't find that in our model. But could happen maybe if we extend the research on the study with adding more waves, we could see something like this. Yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah. I think it would be interesting to see this theoretical model in the symptoms, right?
And in this study, Bia, how do you deal with multiple testing?
We didn't correct for multiple testing in this study, because we chose these predictors, and we didn't think it was needed to add this evaluation. Do you think it would be important to have done?
I don't. I just want to know your decision about not using and not testing for multiple testing, but because I understand what you're saying, that as you have the factors, a priori factors that you choose, that you have this theoretical basis for choosing these factors, so you won't need to deal with the multiple testing. But I think sometimes all the reviewers, and they also ask about multiple testing. So I don't know. It's just something for us to discuss.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we didn't thought was needed in this case. But yeah, it's something that it's good that you brought it, and you'll think about.
Okay, but I really enjoy this paper, and I think it gives shed some light in the trajectories. And I don't want to keep on asking you many questions, but related to the study 3, that this is the one that you haven't published yet. It's a promising study that you couldn't find any. The neuroimaging could not show there is an association related to anxiety in the machine learning analysis. And I think also concerning age and IQ that you found in the second study, I had some ideas that, like the Generation R studies also have shown neuroimaging findings for depression, but not for anxiety. And do you think this discrepancy reflects difference in the neurodevelopment trajectory of these disorders? I think sometimes that anxiety kids have an accelerate development instead of a delay development, because they are always worried and they have all these threats and all these things. So I think they have a different way of the brain to develop. And I think this aligns with your finding of the IQ and age, because when you have a high IQ, probably you can deal with anxiety because you are accelerate, and since the challenges get bigger, you have some problems. So have you ever thought about studying the trajectories in brain development concerning that anxiety has an accelerated development and not a delayed one? Because we always look at the different development and we look for the delay development and not an accelerate course.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I didn't think about that. I think it's really a good hypothesis. And we could, in our cohort, to look at maybe to compute a variable as well in FreeSurfer to evaluate this rate of change and compare the rate of change of some regions between children with anxiety, maybe that persistently have anxiety, to other healthy controls. It would be really interesting, I think, to look at this rate of change instead of volume, let's say, or cortical thickness in one data point, right? To look at it longitudinally. I think it would be interesting. Yeah.
It's just something to think about. I always think about things that could make you, that challenge you and that you keep on studying anxiety, because people got so disappointed that they found nothing in neuroimaging, nothing in genetics, so they usually give away the anxiety and goes for some fancy results in other disorders. So I usually want to keep you with us and try to study things that really makes a difference in clinical populations. So that's why do you think that this difference between the time that you choose in anxiety and the brain imaging has any effect on the whole results of your third study? Because you told us, you described that when the youth has more than one anxiety in the different evaluations, you pick one by random. Do you think it can influence your results?
Yeah, I think so. We decided to select one moment because it would be really complicated to include all the scans from the participants, because they are really correlated with each other. So we need a machine learning model that's much more complex to deal with this repeated measure. And this was like the first step, but maybe later we could build a more complex model like this that considers repeated measures and machine learning. Not our regular statistics as well, but for machine learning, we would need to consider these repeated measures as well, as because if you scan one person today and 3 years from now, these scans are really correlated. So we need to consider that. And we decided not to do this at this moment, and to compare anxiety versus healthy controls and see if we could find any difference, and we didn't. But another step could be to look at this longitudinally and maybe then find something. I don't know.
Yeah, because I really agree with you. And the problem with precision psychiatry concerning anxiety is the thing that we are going to study if we have that if we trust exactly the factors that we are putting on the model. And I think we have lots of problem with psychometric and everything in anxiety, because environment usually plays a really important role in this disorder. So I think the studies are not this consistent related precision psychiatry and anxiety, because the walks and main courses usually changes a lot, and we have some problems related to psychometric that could help us, and we don't have exactly factors that we can put in the model and you can really trust over time. And neuroimaging and genetics are not helping us in anxiety. And I think that it's because the ability is only 30%, for instance. So I really agree with you that we should study other PRS like neuroticism, like behavior inhibition, and things that usually have more consistent results with anxiety. And Bia, I think what I want to, just for us to end, I really want to congratulate you for this beautiful, beautiful study. And I'm worried about you not running away. So I want to know your plans for the future.
Yeah. Gisele, I want to thank you so much for all your comments and suggestions, and for always supporting me during this period, and for for all your care as well. And for the future, I'm not totally sure yet. I was thinking about studying developmental coordination disorder. That's a different area that's not anxiety, but maybe also continue studying anxiety as well, because I find it really interesting. I'm not totally sure yet, but Professor Giovanni Salum said about this possibility of studying this other disorder, so I'm considering because of him as well. And also it's really interesting, there's really scarce literature about it, so it would be interesting to look in our cohort to see this in a community sample, how this disorder that usually studied in clinical settings behaves, what we find. But I thinking about, I don't know, I'm also curious about anxiety, and we are collecting the fourth wave, so it would be interesting to look at it. And I don't know, I'm not sure yet.
See, was my big concern, that you ran away from anxiety.
Yeah.
So I really want to push you and to keep with us in this hard study. And it was really, really a pleasure to see all your trajectory, not the anxiety one, but your trajectory. You were really a great researcher, and it has been a pleasure to be watching you growing and developing in the accelerate way. And it's very nice to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me for this committee. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, good morning. Good morning, Professor Leckman and Gisele. Before I start, I want to Really thank you, Bia, and also Professor Euripides and Professor Leckman as advisors for the invitation to be here. For me, it's an honor, but also I would say a little bit challenging to be here with such great and important researchers. Thus, I hope I will do my best to contribute in some way with your work. First, I would like to congratulate you and our advisors for our achievements. I think they are remarkable. As Professor Gisali just explored, I think you study a very important and challenging topic, and you did great relevant contributions, producing 3 papers and also others as co-authors. And sorry. And I think beyond that, going beyond that, I think it's impressive how you manage to work with different methodologies. I think you learn how to do complex statistical analysis. You manage to work with neuroimaging and genetics. So, and on the one hand, I think you were able to leverage the data set that we have with the Brazilian high-risk cohort. And on the other hand, looking for the future, I think you're in a great position to do other projects and develop your career as researchers, studying anxiety or other topics. And also, I'm starting to work with the BHRC, but I think it was very nice the way that you recognize and acknowledge all the people that supported you and that were part of the project. I think this was highlighted during the CISM event that happened recently, and the importance of teamwork. This is a huge project. I'm learning how challenges to keep moving forward this, and I think this was great. Also, when I saw you co-authoring with our colleagues, I was very happy because some of them in particular were my colleagues during med school and residence. So it's great to see all of you growing and producing great work. Also, I want to remind your generosity when I personally ask you to teach me about the cohort when I started working with Professor Euripides. And finally, I want to congratulate you for your presentation. I think you did with clarity, objectiveness, and I think you add important information that make clear and easier to understand your thesis. I think the images help a lot, and maybe you could think about adding this to your final version of the thesis. I think it's the waves, the way that you describe the cohort, and also some points that you highlighted during your presentation. Said that, I will do a brief comments, then I will go further for the questions. So, and starting for this point in page 17, in the introductions, when you were describing the BGRC, I suggest you to kind of highlight the strengths of this cohort. I think it can kind of underscore the importance of the project and all the potential of work. And beginning with that, like you keep the, I don't know, the reader with this in mind. Also, you discussed, so I won't go in details about the similarities and the difference between anxiety and OCD. And I think it's interesting to kind of think about how you studied this separately and how we can kind of lump and combine and study this together, consider the similarities. But in page 18, it's kind of a detail, but I think it's worth saying that. So at some point you say that you decide to broaden the psychopathology construct by including anxiety symptoms. So for me, it's when I read that, I imagine that going through your work would have studied this, then combined. So it's just more a matter of rephrasing it. I think it would be clear. But also I would ask you if you think that studying these two disorders together in more a dimensional approach would be worth it, and maybe what do you think you would find differently?
Yeah, I think it. Can you hear me? I think it would be interesting. I think a limitation was the for the second study, was a bit about the questionnaire, because we used only scared, and there's no obsessive compulsive symptom in this scale, and there's no evaluation of obsessive compulsive symptom in this scale. On the third study, we could have included OCD as well, but there was really a few cases. I thought about including maybe PTSD as well, but there was only a few cases. In our cohort, we don't have many OCD cases, and I studied it in a categorical diagnosis on that third study. So there were not many cases. Then I decided not to include because of that. But in a dimensional way, we could have done in the second one, but then the limitation of this questionnaire, I think. But I think I need to change on the thesis, as you said, about this, how I rephrase that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think in the cohort, we have so many kind of questionnaires, and we have the whole down, but maybe I think it could be interesting.
Yeah.
And going further, I think just to recognize that in our theoretical review, I think you did a comprehensive review, and I think you demonstrated deep knowledge about the literature, which is nice. Maybe I think it's more kind of suggestion. I think it's good in the way that you did, but two things while I was reading that I think it could have been clear, like while you were revising the literature, you make a small and little comments about your work.
Yeah.
I think it would be easier if you could like synthesize all of them, maybe in the end of the sections, or maybe at the end, because sometimes like you make a comment, but then you start writing about maybe, for example, anxiety trajectories, but it's just more a matter of style that came to my mind while I was reading. And also the other things that when you present the abstract, the introductions, you make a rationale, like study 1, study 2, and study 3. And it was this with my mind, but on the literature review, we start off anxiety and then start by study 2. And then I say, okay, I need to make other kind of thoughts, but it's just like what I think could improve even more on a work that it's already good. So going to the specific questions that I thought it would be interesting to ask you, Bia, I start with paper 1. And I was wondering why you only use the 2 time points. And if I don't know when exactly you did the analysis, if you already have, but when I was looking to the chronology of the study, maybe you already have data from wave 2, like the third point.
Yes. No, I didn't, because I did this analysis and that it was published a bit on 2021, but at that time I didn't have the.
But now that you have the wave 2 and also almost the wave 3, do you think it would be worth it to look more? And based on the literature, what would you expect to have a more broad time span?
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to look at this, like investigate if children with increased thalamic volume or a different rate of thalamic development, rate of change would be, if this would predict OCD later on, now that we have more participants that are adults, maybe they developed OCD. We need to see this 4th wave result, because until the 3rd wave we don't have many OCD cases. But maybe on the 4th wave we have. It's not a really prevalent disorder, so can be hard, but we could do that to evaluate the diagnosis and evaluate if we could find different thalamic trajectories for these people with OCD. And yeah, I think it would be interesting to look at that. Or maybe also look in that dimensional way again, if we don't have many cases. And maybe also look if obsessive-compulsive symptoms can predict OCD as well. That would be interesting.
Thank you. And I had similar thoughts as Gisele about the psychometric properties of the DALBA. I won't go through this discussion again, but two kind of more small questions. Do you know if previous studies have used DALBA in this way?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, at least for OCD, I don't.
And when I look at your graph that show like that most kids, almost everyone, have 5 or less symptoms.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the clinical significance of that. I know you told us it's hard because you have few cases, but just have an idea, and as you are a clinician also, and you know the field, if you would consider 5 clinical significant, like it's clinically meaningful, like having a score of that. And I don't know if you have the chance to look, like it's only 5 people, but what was the score for the ones who really indeed have a disorder, just for us to have an idea? I was kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, they had a much higher score, also because the diagnosis was made using the DALBA as well, because it's a different rating with the clinician rating it, but so they had a higher score, but only these 5 cases, and it's hard to. But we were studying it dimensionally, so that's why maybe having few symptoms is not that important, but maybe like in the population, this could be related to this brain alterations, and it's what we found. There is another study that I didn't mention, but they also found alterations in thalamic volume related to symptoms in a cohort. So
yeah, I think it's a way to study this dimensionally, but everything is so skewed from
yeah,
the
yeah.
left. So this might have impacted the results.
Yeah.
Also, you talk a little bit about the decision to use the last analysis that you used the OC factors.
Yeah.
But I was curious why you decided to use mixed effect modeling in this last analysis. I understand that, if I understand correctly, because in your previous analysis, you already found you considered the change, like when you use the SCP, you considered change. So I don't know what would add to do this kind of statistical analysis.
Yeah, it was because I had 2 measurements for these OC factor scores. I had the baseline that was made with the parents report, and I had the follow-up that was made with parents and youth report. So I had 2 measurements, and if I did this hurdle model, it's a cross-sectional. I would need to put these 2 variables in the same model, and I think I don't remember, but they are correlated. I could make a score based on them, but it would be really more complicated, like the change on symptoms. But I don't know how they are, they correspond even to the same construct, but I'm considering it here that corresponds to the same construct. But I could maybe do this change in symptoms and then use this variable in this model. But we decided to use this mixed effect model because then we could evaluate the influence of these 2 variables in considering the time as well and the volume. And we didn't use the mixed effects model in the first like with the OCS variable, because we didn't have the first wave or the baseline measurement for it, because it was computed with youth answers, and we only had youth answers for the follow-up. So we couldn't make a mixed effects model, because otherwise we would be predicting maybe the volume in the past with the symptom in the future. So it would be complicated to do that. It wouldn't be logical to add this to a mixed model. This this follow-up variable, and we didn't have the baseline for it. So that's why we didn't do mixed models for all the as well. For the OCS as well, we decided to use this variable that's the meteorized expression change because it's already computed. There's 2 volumes on it, and we thought we could use as a predictor and not. Yeah. I don't know if I could.
Yeah, no, you could explain it, and nice because I learned something about more. I think more in that the analysis that he used, but just to keep on moving on that, did you thought about using other statistical models? I'm asking because in my PhD I was asked this question because you have 2 time points, and mixed effect models most of the time are used when you have repeated measures. So it's just wondering if you discuss about using other statistical methods.
Yeah. Other besides these 2?
Yeah,
No.
because we have this one, and understand why you couldn't keep the same. But
Okay.
why mixed effect models if you have only 2 measures? If you discuss about using other.
No, we thought about using the mixed effects model for this repeated measures. I don't know if you thought about other, because for the hurdle model we thought about Poisson, but then it made more sense to use the hurdle model. But for the mixed effects, I don't know if.
Yeah, I think it's fine. We use for 2 measures.
Yeah.
But it can be used when you have more time points.
Oh yeah, it would be.
And for example, for the cohort, for further you could keep on using
other analysis, like yeah.
And my last question about paper 1, I was thinking about the enigma that only unmedicated child, they found an effect on thalamus only for the unmedicated. If you had the chance to look how many of the kids on the cohort are using medication, not for OCD because they don't have the diagnosis, but most of them may have comorbidities or may have used medication. So I was wondering if you have looked at this.
I didn't look specifically to this. I know that in the cohort we have a little, just a few cases that use medication. It's not that common in the cohort, because there's a problem with lacking access to treatment. There's a paper from Daniel Fattori on that, but
yeah, true.
Yeah, but I didn't look at it specifically for how many had used medication or not. But I guess most of them didn't.
Okay, it makes sense. I think it's only 20% that got treatment, right?
Oh, okay.
So moving for paper 2, I was thinking as Gisele about the selection of the environmental factors. And one of the questions that you already answered is why choosing threat and not including deprivation. But also I was wondering what do you think about, and you have the chance to look about the frequency that the kids, because the threat is most abuse, right?
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, Julia's papers, you have bullying, that it's more prevalent, but it's almost everything related to abuse that are more severe and that's not that prevalent. And I was wondering if you think about looking like peer problems of other kind of environmental stressors. And if it would be interesting, you think it would be interesting maybe to look deprivation or socioeconomic factors, not only as covariates, but also as a factor to look at. Yeah.
I chose threat because of a few reasons, actually. Both of them were correlated, like the threat and deprivation were correlated. So if I added both of them in my model, this could introduce some bias because of this correlation and this multicollinearity. And it would be hard to disentangle this contribution of each of them. And so I picked the threat to exposure because we thought theoretically these experiences of abuse and violence and this more they are fear-inducing events, and then it could be theoretically more related to fear-based response as anxiety is. and this hypervigilance and internalizing symptom. And also, the prevention usually is related to cognitive deficits, like and like this neglect or lack of social support, and usually is more related to cognitive deficits or depression as well, but also could be related to this chronic stress and anxiety. So it's not that I don't think it's important. I just had to make a decision which one I was picking, and then I decided to go with Fred in this.
Great. And this is something that I don't know, so I was wondering if you could explain to me how to interpret in the graph, because the decreasing group at the end, at the third time point, has a negative result, right? It goes like 0, -2. How I should interpret this negative result?
Negative.
In the graph, you have like the moderate, I think it's on 0, and then you go.
Oh, it's because the scared is centralized.
Okay.
Or how can I yeah, I forgot the word.
So
but it's the scare factor score, it's normalized.
Okay.
That's why it goes from -1 to 1 almost. Yeah. It has this range because it's the factor score that we computed.
So
that's how it's computed.
I think it makes sense. And in your paper, you described the diagnosis for the two groups, the increasing and decreasing, right? But did you have the chance to look the diagnosis on the moderate group? Because at the end, they have more anxiety than the decreasing group, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, on the graph.
If they have this.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember that we had this, I would have to look at it, but I remember that we found this correlation, a higher prevalence of panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic, social anxiety on this blue group that's low increasing. And we found more separation anxiety. I'm not sure about specific phobia, but I think specific phobia as well, more in the second wave for the high decreasing class. But for the moderate low, I don't think we, I would have to double check, but I don't think we had more symptoms, like a higher incidence of or prevalence of other anxiety disorders in this.
And did you look for other diagnoses? Because I was thinking about this difference that could be more neurodevelopmental, that, start early, and then the increase in that is something that started in puberty. So I was wondering if you may have like different ADD, like.
Yeah.
And you have this correlation with IQs. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't look at other disorders, only anxiety. I didn't look at. It would be interesting. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's that. And for paper 3, I was just wondering if you're considering looking at environmental factors, because you show the papers that only find associate that the model could predict when they combine, and we have this data in the cohort, and I was wondering if you thought about it.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to look at it. Our aim was to see if we could predict with neuroimaging. It was our focus. Andrés Ugman, who is who helped me a lot with this, is kind of a co-supervisor working with neuroimaging, and we decided to focus on neuroimaging here. But I think it would be interesting to also look at other variables, demographic. Then there are many variables possible, because we have many variables in our cohort. So social demographics, genetics again, or also these stressors that you said that it would be interesting to look at. There are many possible ways of trying to predict the anxiety, and I think it would be interesting to do that in the future as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking that anxiety is this complex disorder that you have not, it's different when you compare for disorders like ADD, that you have high heritability, and you have the models that for treatment we use like medication, and for ADD is kind of the other directions that that psychotherapeutic and environmental like factors plays a role. So maybe if we combine, it can be a way to have more models that could predict the outcomes better.
I agree. It would be really interesting to look at that.
Yeah, I think that it was that I was that I thought about asking you. Again, I really want to thank you for the invitation and give you congratulations for the work.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Professor Leckman, Gisele. Thank you very much, Beatriz, and Jim and Euri for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here reading Bia's work and having the opportunity to listen to you and also to talk to Bia about her work. So first of all, I would like to stress something that you have stressed in the first part of your thesis in the acknowledgement, what this work represents. So we have here a huge study that has been funded by INPD, and Euripides is the leader. Professor Leckman is one of Euri's mentor over time and had a great influence on the production of INPD, on how the project was conceptualized. And you have a huge team that worked with you, and you have now the opportunity to look to this data, to work with this huge team, and to have the privilege of being mentored by Jim. So I think this is a really something that especially Euri should be proud of, because it really says about how he works and how he is able to aggregate people and to see the future and to support the future investigators and professionals. So I think you're very fortunate of this opportunity, and I think you made the most of it. And I think I know you since, I think, before the residency, and I had the opportunity to be your supervisor during residency. So I testified how committed you are and how serious you are, and since the beginning of your trajectory as a psychiatrist, how research was and is important to you, and how you understand this is a value to be fostered over time. So I really would like to congratulate Euri, Leckman, and you for this wonderful project. I also would like to acknowledge Sandra, who you mentioned in your acknowledgement, who you mentioned had a great role in your career, and who unfortunately is not here anymore with us. So I think your work, I had the opportunity to discuss with you in the first panel I think, the work has grown, and I think you have demonstrated several skills and an involving knowledge of the field. So I think this is really fantastic. As Luisa mentioned, you used multiple methods of analysis, of research. So you have epidemiological components, you have genetic, you have imaging. So it's a really complex piece of work, actually, and the possibility to look to all of it in an integrated model. I think it's really important when you are considering emotional and environmental, let's say that word, risk factors alongside genetics and imaging biomarkers. So I think this is really important. And the question of prediction is a very important question in our field. Not only who will develop, but once you have the disorder or once you have the symptoms, who will continue on this trajectory. So I think overall, in terms of methods, in terms of the novelty and the importance of the questions, they are really important. Your work, your thesis is very well written. Also, I would like to congratulate you on the writing skill, which is really important for us, and in English, actually. So not only writing, but also your ability to speak and to defend your work in English. So I think this is this says a lot about your commitment and about your investment in your development as a researcher. So I think the document is very well written. I did read the document. So just a few things. In your summary in Portuguese, you use abbreviations in English. So I would replace that. On page 38, you use N in an uppercase to refer to sample size. The letter N you use in uppercase to refer to sample size, whereas in page 39 you use lowercase. So you should keep lowercase to refer to sample size.
Which one was the first page?
38.
38. Oh.
Yeah. Your specific objectives on page 41. Let me go with. So I don't think here on page 41, because this is something that we still lack a clear format or a clear guideline to how to write a thesis that is a compilation of papers. So I think we should, as a program, work a little bit and have some more objective instructions on how to do it. And people does that in different ways. So I think here in your specific objectives, page 41, I don't think here we are talking about the study itself. So I think we are really talking about the objectives of your thesis. So it may be, something superficial, but I would keep in a more formal way when we when we articulate objectives. So I would remove this reference to study 1, 2, and 3, and really articulate the specific objectives of your work based on the general objective. And I think that's it. I think your general conclusion on the thesis, I think it doesn't represent the knowledge you developed and how much you learn and how much you are able to articulate the methods and the ideas in the field. So I really would expand the conclusion of the general conclusion of your paper, of your thesis. And one general comment, I have very few specific comments on each of the papers, and maybe 2 or 3 general comments and questions. And I think in several points of your thesis, when you have several negative results, which is fine, which is absolutely fine, and we learn from negative results as much as we learn from positive results. When we understand that the negative results are not because of methodological problems, but because they are really negative. So, and I had the impression, and I may be wrong, but in several points, when you discuss the negative results, you stress the methodological problems or limitations, sometimes not making sense of the negative result as a true negative result. And I may be wrong in some points. For example, in the last paper, when you mentioned that MRI measures are not yet ready to be integrated in clinical models, and you say that, but then you say we should have samples with larger sample sizes and maybe fMRI. So I think you're right, but it gives me impression sometimes that sometimes you don't believe on the negative result, or you're not certain about it. Did I read it right, or you don't think so?
It's hard to say, like for the neuroimaging, let's say. I think for anxiety, it will be harder to find alterations related to anxiety, like the enigma anxiety. It's really, they didn't find yet any specific brain correlates of anxiety on the structural analysis. But we don't know. I think the negative results is a problem that it could be that we couldn't capture this, the relationship if we had great, bigger sample size, larger sample size, or could be that we won't find really relationship at, let's say, with the brain and anxiety disorders. Also, as Professor Gisele was saying, that the genetics of this, the inheritance of these disorders are lower than the for ADHD, let's say, or autism. But I don't think that our finding is interesting and it's important in the literature as a negative finding, like for this last study. And we believe in it, and we are trying to publish, and also to maybe other people could think other ways of analyzing and maybe trying to find something. But I think it's for structural MRI, let's say, I'm taking this example, it's really hard to predict anxiety based on structural MRI, and I think it's something that might be, that's the case for anxiety, let's say. I think it's, yeah. I don't know if I answered.
I think you did. I don't think there is a specific or maybe right or wrong answer. But following up your rationale, if previous studies and even larger studies didn't find had negative results, why did you hypothesize that you would be able to discriminate?
Yeah, I wanted to evaluate if we could do that, right? I think there are still few studies on that. So we wanted to look in a different model, because there are so many options of models you can do. And we tried one model that we believe, like we built it. I had some support from data analysts to build it, and we couldn't find a relationship. Yeah, but we thought maybe it wouldn't be what we thought could happen. We thought that the predictive capability would be moderate, not like really good to be used in clinic, but maybe moderate. But we couldn't replicate on this sample. We thought maybe we would find a moderate ability to predict, but yeah, we couldn't. Yeah.
And another point that I don't know what your thoughts are. It may be related to the negative results. Is the nature of your sample? You are studying a populational sample, a community sample.
Yeah.
So how do you see that the sample, the nature of the sample, may have influenced your findings?
Yeah, I think it can impact in many ways, because people in the community usually they have less severe disease, and even if we try to increase the chance of selecting people in the community that have a higher risk of developing the mental health disorders, because we had this risk prioritization process. Even with this method, I think people from the community may have less symptoms than in a clinic, so it's harder to identify biological alterations, I think, in the community. And on the other hand, it's important also to analyze data in a real world setting, even if we don't have the most severe cases. I think it's really interesting to look at that. So this could be a reason that we couldn't find, because then we need much bigger sample to find something. But on the other hand, I think it's interesting to look at how the symptoms develop in the community. And also this study allows us to evaluate longitudinally the participants, and this is really unique and rare in our study. So this is really a strength of the study. But I think these negative findings might be related to this maybe less severe, or also the instruments that we use are a limitation, because when people come to our offices, we are evaluating them in a clinical interview, and we do clinical interviews, and now in the fourth wave, we are doing some psychiatrists are directly interviewing the participants, few of the participants. But also we have this instrument to analyze, and this could be a limitation, also about informants as well. So there are a few limitations that can impact the results, I think. How can we, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you are a clinician as well, and you may be seeing what we are all seeing, that families and adolescents are sometimes interpreting normal symptoms or normal behaviors or normal expressions of the development as symptoms, and sometimes pathologizando the expression of normal development. And in what sense do you think that your study look into obsessive-compulsive symptoms, anxiety symptoms in the population? In what sense do you think that your study may reinforce the language? We are talking about obsessive-compulsive symptoms. We are talking anxiety symptoms. It's a dimension. These individuals may develop a full-blown so in what sense your work here, and when I'm telling you your work, I'm saying really our work. So is reinforcing this concept that is nowadays widespread.
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but like for the participants of the cohort, how could we be reinforcing them to look at, or no? Because I thought about
for the field in general, for the
for the field.
participants, for our colleagues, for the new researchers,
Mhm.
for how the community is seeing this phenomenon.
Okay. Because initially I thought about the participants, then if we keep asking them if they have the symptoms, then maybe this could, maybe they could start to think, oh, maybe I have that. And yeah, this could be happening nowadays with, yeah, I think it's possible that we see this increase of symptoms, or at least people talking about symptoms. Oh, I have ADHD. ADHD is the one that's most popular right now, or autism, and people are, I think this is happening, maybe more because of social media than our research, I think, but could be that how we are studying it could be something that also impacts somehow. But I think more about how social media and how people share their experience, and people identify with traits that happen in the general population, because all the disorders are maybe not all, but many disorders are, let's say, we categorized somehow a normal behavior that happens in more frequency, in a higher frequency in these people with these disorders, let's say. And so people recognize maybe a few symptoms and themselves, and then they diagnose themselves. And this can be a burden to these people, to this young adult, let's say, or youth. And I think that's something that we should consider maybe on our study, to look at this and how maybe ask some questions about it. Do you think you have a disease or disorder? I never thought about it, but it would be interesting to see what the participant would answer, let's say, and then we can compare, yeah, with the diagnosis, and it would, yeah.
In your first study, do you know how many individuals with OCS developed OCD?
No, I didn't look at. Yeah, I didn't look at it. I think it would be really interesting, but I don't think we have many cases on wave 3 of OCD when I looked. I don't remember the number, but I think it was maybe like 10 or really few, less than 20. And also because I have this neuroimaging sample, so sometimes I mistake, because sometimes I look at this subsample and not the whole sample. But I remember for this neuroimaging was really, really low, less than 10, I think, or maybe 10. And but it would be interesting to look at maybe now the 4th wave, because women usually develop OCD a bit late, could be in the early adulthood. So I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, I think in this paper, for example, your finding on the PRS does not support this dimensional model, and does not support that OCS in the community is the same, or at least has some biological similarities or etiological similarities with OCD. Whereas your structural data may indicate that.
Yes.
So and I think we keep saying that all disorders are dimensional, and it may be true for some of the individuals and for some of the disorders, but it's not true for
all. Yeah, I think so.
I think Luisa has already addressed the thing that I was. On your second paper, one thing that, I mean, when you say that the threat exposure and the PRS, they are not associated with the trajectory. Yeah, but are they associated with the intercept, with the baseline score?
I didn't look at the baseline score, like the confirmatory factor, the scared score, right? I didn't look at the baseline score specifically.
Because I think this is something that is subtle, but it's important to understand that they are not associated, and the risk factors for trajectory are not necessarily the same of the risk factors for the phenomenon, for the disorder. So, and even the genes, we know, at least in other areas, that genes associated with the disorder are not the same as genes associated with the trajectory. So I think this is maybe something just to highlight there.
Okay.
And finally, using and having studied different markers, let's say that word, PRS, genetic markers, and MRI, and so imaging, how do you see the future and the potential integration of these methods in predictor models for clinical use in the near future or in the future?
Yeah, I think for genetics, both of them, like genetics and neuroimaging, are really expensive exams. And right now, I don't think we will use it in a short term for diagnosis or prediction, but in the future, it may be the case. But we could already use maybe the other predictors that are more easily collected in our clinics to predict severity or persistence, or even maybe the diagnosis. That could help, I think. And we could maybe already build some models and tests on this demographic and clinical characteristics. And this, I think, it can be used earlier than the other models that require a lot of investments on collecting this data. And this is still not ready, I think, for clinic, but maybe someday. Also, there is our study starting to collect data on ecological momentary assessment data. This could also be interesting and maybe easier to get than this other complex data as neuroimaging and genetics, and this could be used for prediction as well. I think that's really interesting. And I think it's not ready for the clinics. I think other areas of medicine are more closer to using possible prediction models, but we are, I think, a bit further away. But we could also, I think it's important to continue to study that, because it would be really interesting if we could predict who will develop a disease or also who will respond to treatment. I think it's a really interesting area to continue doing research, even if we are a bit still not so close to get to an algorithm that could do that. Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is something to be studied, to be continuous study, and I'm very glad that you continue on this path, just like Gisele mentioned, and I think it's really important. For me, it's a real pleasure to be here evaluating your thesis, Beatriz, and I think this panel has this transgenerational nature. So Jim is is the father of our discipline. And I have been influenced by him when I was at med school. So he has a huge impact on my career. Gisele was my supervisor when I was a resident. So Luisa was my student, and she's now sitting along with me, and you were my resident. So I think this is really nice, of course, and Euri is here overseeing everything and making sure that everything goes well. So I'm really glad that what we are seeing here is a continuous growth of people interested in research and interested in understanding with scientific rigor the mental disorders and how can we better help our children. And I'm sure that you'll be continuing in this trajectory. So thank you again for the invitation and congrats.
Thank you.
Jim, now the final word, your final words, please.
You need to unmute, Jim. Still muted.
Can you hear me now? I guess I just wanted to begin by saying congratulations to Beatriz. It's really wonderful to see her in action and to look forward to the future in terms of what she will be bringing to our work as a team, and it's going to make a difference in the lives of many children and families. So many thanks, many thanks. And I guess the other thing I wanted to say thank you about is the fact that this is all being done in English rather than Portuguese. And that's amazing. And I'm so grateful that this is something that we've had the opportunity to do. And I'm looking forward to the discussion that I'll be having with the individuals on the team. And I'm sure we'll come back with some very positive results for dear Beatriz. But I really am looking forward to the future and her contributions to this field. And they will be very important indeed. So I'm not sure there's too much else to say, except that it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with the team. And I must say the data set that is available to evaluate is quite remarkable in terms of the high-risk cohort. And I'm looking forward to the next opportunity to be there in person. But I think we can probably have our meeting of the panel shortly. But thank you. Obrigado.
Again, in the name of our post-graduation program, Jim, thanks a lot for supporting our program, being the supervisor of BIA, and being here today, and for all the work that you have been doing, helping our institution to go further, and particularly on this PhD, this thesis. Bia, I wanna, as we will stop a little bit to give your grades, I want to thank you for all your investment on our institution in your work. I have to say that I was very impressed with your commitment, your ability to work with a lot of people, your capacity to look for help and find help, and create credibility among the people who invest to help you, that you would be able at the end to finalize, to make it done, although sometimes it was very difficult because limitations of the methods and everything. It is I learned a lot with your desire to do everything very well. Sometimes I told Bia, not so perfect. is good enough. But the final result is a very good work. Sometimes I also found Bia too humble, but so I think Guilherme did a good point when he said, well, negative result is a result, is a nice result, it's a result to be emphasized. So sometimes I'd like you to be less modest, and but probably this is another of your qualities. And when I think about your gentleness, when I think about your kindness, your delicacy, and all your strength, I cannot imagine the people who steal you these values. So, having said that, I wanna congratulate your father Fabio and your mother Cassia for the great job you have done having such a incredible creature like Bia. So congratulations for the two of you. So now we'll leave a little bit and come back in a few minutes with the grades. Jim, we'll go to a new link, right? I'll send you a new link.
I have it.
Found you in the new link.
I have it.
Oh, should we get off from this link and go to the other one? Is it this right?
Yes, exactly. And Gisele, let me also thank you from Rio Grande do Sul to your support for our graduation program as well. You have been participating in several theses, several defenses, and now today again. So thank you very much for doing that for us. I'm saying us, I'm not thank you to Guilherme and Luisa because we are thanking them, right? Okay, so we'll come back. We'll find you in another link and come back in a few minutes.
Esse é o outro, só que nós escreveu um montão. Ah, vou escrever aqui. Não, só que não foi no outro. Eu coloquei uma parte do poema que só havia saber sobre. Não precisa de nome. Eu falei para escrever no outro, já não tinha explicações. Não vou escrever, eu vou escrever muito, não vou escrever.
Dá para banco escrever nesse aqui.
Atrás é legal.
Deixa eu escrever o tiro.
Aquela que eu falei, depois eu tenho feito assim, entre o outro, é muito juntinho. Isso.
É difícil, né? É difícil. Outra você vai pelo YouTube. Eu vi lá naquele YouTube também. Agora você vai curtir.
Cheguei ontem de manhã cedo, só que eu não consegui dormir. Você fica seguro. Tem uma coisa que a gente
Jim, I think it's easier for us just to open the new link. We are always before them.
Yeah. I'll turn on the audio here in the camera, and we are waiting for them a little bit.
Yes.
How are you feeling, Bia? Less heavy?
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You should turn on the mute, turn off the mute.
Okay. Can you hear now, Jim and Gisele?
Yes, indeed. Perfect.
So, Jim, so I was telling them that the committee now will make their report, and you will make the report. Please go
Well,
ahead.
Yes, well, it's such an honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, Beatrix. And the committee met, and we decided that you have shown great effort and dedication in preparing your thesis. In our estimation, your thesis was well-developed in quality and in depth. And of course, the presentation that you made during the defense was well-structured and presented clearly and objectively the findings that you had from the 3 studies that you conducted. And I must say that your response to the comments and questions that were made by the 3 committee members were also superb. And they demonstrated a deep knowledge of the topics that were covered. And therefore, believe it or not, the opinion of our committee is that you passed your doctorate, and congratulations. It's really wonderful to see you in action. And as I said before, we're looking forward to what the future holds and the contributions that you'll be making to individuals affected by these conditions and the future in terms of students and mentoring and other things that you will be superb at. So welcome, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to say a few words to thank you all. And first, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to you, Professor James Leckman. That's my advisor, and I'm really thankful for all your support throughout these years. And I admire your kindness, your patience, your integrity, and your ideals. And you have been a role model for me. And I thank you for all your guidance and support throughout this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to say a few words in Portuguese, if that's okay with you, to thank everyone here. Bom, eu gostaria de agradecer muito pela banca, pela dedicação e pela avaliação, né? E o reconhecimento também do meu trabalho. Agradeço muito. E também agradecer pelas sugestões que vocês deram e as contribuições, né? Que foram de grande valia para a tese e também para o meu crescimento como pesquisadora. E eu agradeço ao professor Guilherme pelo apoio também durante a graduação, a residência, na verdade, né? A graduação e residência. E eu admiro muito a sua inteligência, professor, a sua dedicação, a sua integridade, seu rigor científico. E eles me inspiram a buscar essas qualidades também. E também agradeço pelo aprendizado clínico todo que você me deu na época da residência. E eu agradeço muito a Gisele também, por toda a contribuição e apoio nos meus projetos. Eu admiro muito também sua inteligência e dedicação no que você faz, você é uma inspiração para mim. Admiro muito seu trabalho em ansiedade, te agradeço o carinho também com que sempre você me tratou. E sempre o apoio que você me deu mesmo longe, espero que ter você mais perto, se possível, aqui em São Paulo, quando você puder, né? E eu também agradeço muito a Luísa, pela contribuição hoje, mas também pelo apoio, pela amizade, pela cumplicidade. E eu admiro muito a sua dedicação a tudo que você faz, a sua dedicação aqui para o IPQ, e sua brilhante trajetória acadêmica também, e a sua dedicação ao ensino e ao cuidado dos pacientes. Eu fico muito feliz de ter duas mulheres que eu admiro muito aqui na minha banca, né, que são um modelo para mim como mulher e pesquisadora. E eu não posso deixar de lembrar também da professora Sandra, né, Esquivoleto, que foi uma das figuras mais importantes na minha formação como psiquiatra da infância e adolescência, como o professor Guilherme também lembrou. E eu busco trazer os ensinamentos dela na minha prática, sempre que possível, ela está comigo. E eu também queria agradecer a pessoa que tornou tudo isso possível, que é o professor Eurípides também, que foi o meu orientador não oficial, né? E ele me deu todo o suporte que eu precisava. Eu te agradeço muito por me encorajar, por acreditar em mim. E eu não posso dizer o quanto admiro a sua dedicação incansável ao nosso IPQ, né? À faculdade, ao IPQ, aos seus alunos, aos projetos de pesquisa. Você é uma peça fundamental em todos os projetos que você está, e não foi diferente no meu doutorado. Então, eu te agradeço muito pela sua generosidade e seu cuidado com as pessoas que estão à sua volta, e admiro muito seu otimismo, que me inspira muito. Outra pessoa fundamental nesse processo foi o André Zugman, que talvez esteja me vendo aí online, espero, que atualmente está no NIH, lá nos Estados Unidos. André, eu não tenho palavras para agradecer toda a sua dedicação durante todos esses anos. Eu agradeço muito por ter acreditado e investido em mim. E eu admiro muito a sua inteligência, sua dedicação e criatividade, que foram muito importantes nesses nossos projetos desses anos. Eu também não posso deixar de agradecer ao Pedro Pan, que é uma das pessoas mais fundamentais da nossa corte. Eu agradeço muito todo o suporte e orientação que você deu nesse processo, por me acolher também no seu grupo, que está representado aqui por alguns colegas, né, a Karina, todo mundo. E eu agradeço muito por ter sido um orientador não oficial também para mim. Eu admiro muito a sua habilidade de estimular a união e o trabalho em equipe, e também a sua alegria, criatividade. Muito obrigada por tudo. Outra pessoa também que foi muito importante para mim e no meu projeto foi o professor Giovanni Salum, e também a corte, e todos esses projetos só foram possíveis graças à dedicação de anos dele, né? E ele é uma pessoa muito inspiradora, ele se dedica como poucos a tudo que ele faz, e ele tem uma lealdade muito grande aos seus princípios, isso me inspira muito. Outra pessoa que foi muito importante para mim foi o Maurício Hoffman também, o professor Maurício Hoffman, que me ajudou em um momento bem importante do meu projeto. Eu agradeço a dedicação que ele ofereceu para mim. Agradeço também a professora Ceissa pela sua dedicação durante a qualificação e por toda a orientação também em todos esses anos, e por me inspirar como uma mulher pesquisadora e psiquiatra. E eu também agradeço a Ana Borg, o Felipe Azanchi e o Marcos Ottolini, que está aqui, por generosamente contribuírem com seu conhecimento técnico e com seu tempo, né? Foi muito importante na análise de dados dos meus projetos. Também queria agradecer a todo o time do Projeto Conexão, que tem algumas pessoas que estão aqui, né? Do NPD, do CISM, da Corte, por toda a amizade e apoio nesse processo. Eu agradeço muito o suporte de vocês, e tudo isso, todo esse projeto só é possível graças ao trabalho de todos, né? A Karina sabe bem. Que trabalha tanto aqui. Eu também queria agradecer a Isabel, a Taíde e a Elisa Fukushima, do Serviço de Pós-Graduação, por me ajudar a lidar com as burocracias desses processos, e pela paciência, pelo cuidado também. Eu queria agradecer muito a minha família, que está minha mãe, minha mãe Kátia, meu pai Fábio, meu irmão Eric, e a minha irmã Ana Luísa, que deve estar me vendo online, a minha avó Lia, que está aqui, minha tia Raquel, meu tio Rui, que estão presentes aqui, e meus amigos também, aqui a Natália, a Val e a pequenininha Paola. Agradeço muito todo mundo por estarem aqui comigo, e por todo o amor, apoio e ajudar a enfrentar os desafios desse doutorado, né? E também eu agradeço profundamente aos pacientes e familiares que doaram seu tempo informações para tornar esses projetos possíveis, né, e contribuir com o desenvolvimento da saúde mental no Brasil. And I'd like also to thank the friends and supervisors from the Helmut Rundschmidt Research Seminar from Yakapa for their support, technical suggestions, advice and encouragement. E eu agradeço também a todos os presentes e todo mundo. Muito obrigada.
Tchau, tchau.
Eu só fiquei com vontade de dizer uma última palavra. Jim, I feel invited by myself to say a few final words to say that I think we had here what's the best of the academic spirit when professors, teachers, and students get together in a lovely relationship. I think when everybody tries to give their best to develop the talent of a student, and you have a very talented student. In talking about knowledge or new knowledge that could make a difference in the life of our patients and their families. So this is the academic spirit for me. So today we have an example for everybody. Thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks a lot, Gisele. See you soon.
Deus.
See you soon. Thank you. Obrigado a todos por estarem aqui hoje. Bye bye, Jim. Bye bye, Gisele. Se o André Zugman estiver agradecendo, eu queria, em nome dele, agradecer a todos que ajudaram a Bia nessa tese, e particularmente a ele. Obrigado. Tchau, Sam.